Alright, this is just a test to see if I can have an atmospheric, sit down with y'all and what I might be doing with this format. This will be a continuation of my Ramble On series, where I usually pick something that I want to talk about and just kind of meander through the thoughts that I have on that thing. Most of it is probably going to be something from my shelf, or over there I have board games as well, and in there I have magic. Yeah, I've stored the magic that I use in all of my games in my closet. So, I just wanted to see if I can't make this a thing for myself, because I have so much that I want to share with everybody. Those who know me and are friends and we hang out and we play games and such understand that I have a lot to say on various things, games included. And I don't really stop talking about it. Definitely something I need to work on. There is an element of if you don't have anything to add to a conversation, there's no real necessity to speak up. And it's odd, this hobby, our role-playing hobby, our game-playing hobby, there's so many differing opinions and views and ways to go about said hobby. And though I am sure the things that I talk about have been said before, and adding my particular voice to it adds to the marketplace of available opinions for people to peruse. And this is just more for me to get it out there rather than it potentially being useful, really. I just like talking about the hobby. So, I'm actually going to try discussing one of my favorite books that I had picked up over the years. The Solo Gamemaster's Guide by Geek Gamers. Made by one of the most heartfelt and sincere and honestly the most down-to-earth creator on YouTube on the solo space. And I have to give her massive credit for the direction that I found within the hobby myself. And I found myself struggling early on, not knowing how to implement the things that were in my head into a game or into thoughts that made sense on paper rather than chicken scratch. And I wouldn't get very far past, creating either a character or building a world or a map. And then from there, I kind of stopped. And honestly, it's a little disheartening when you stop and start and stop and start over and over again. And you could say that it might be gamer's block, or you're uninspired by the game, or various things that don't really come up because you want to play the thing that you sat down and started to play. But to be very honest, utilizing the book itself as for the actual idea of what it is that we struggle with is that everything that we do in this hobby is playing. Everything we do is playing. If you take out a book and read it, that is part of the hobby. And if you are enjoying reading that book, then you are enjoying the hobby. If you are creating a character and getting into the mindset of that character in whatever system or whatever world that you want to play in, you are playing that game. You are embodying that character. You are role playing already. And if you're just building the map or just building the world and you have no idea what characters might come from it, but that is still playing, you are creating a setting that is potentially living and breathing in your head, but you may be struggling on how to voice that creativity. But I find that this book gave me the tools to redirect my thinking into, well, it's okay if I don't play this one game from start to, quote, finish. Remember, role-playing games have no finish. The only finish that we make is the one that we create on our own. So it's pretty simple. I have on my desk right now Vaesen, and I struggled with that solo for so long because while I can separate player knowledge and character knowledge pretty easily, a mystery in of itself is kind of hard to do that, because if I know the mystery of the Vaesen or whomever was involved in the actual misdeed or the crime or whatever it was, then it is harder to enjoy that process of watching my character uncover it, because a mystery is written for the characters just as much as it's written for the players. And that's what I like about mysteries in of themselves. I like solving puzzles as a whole, but I don't want to know every detail on like who did it and why until that is narratively important. And it's very hard to do in a game like Vaesen, where you can't make sense of the connections until you already know what Vaesen did the thing. So the solo rules for Vaesen, I'm going to give a little test drive for myself to see if they jibe with me. And I'm kind of writing a journal with it. Not like a diary journal that is kind of a thing for a lot of the Victorian era and even early 20s, the early 19th century detectives writing a journal on what happened. That's not my style. I like to have a procedure to things. So I will write like what happens for the invitation, a little blurb on that, talk about that, then move on to the prologue, move on to the arrival, and so on and so forth. And little notes here and there, but I probably won't write in the first person for my characters. Yeah, it feels a little odd for me, but that's that aside. This book has, obviously, everyone should go and get this book. I don't know, this book I got as a hardcover from Modifius Entertainment. They are a purveyor of various IPs, Octun Cthulhu, Fallout, Skyrim stuff as well, and among other small press stuff. But I don't know if it's in stock or anything like that. But I got this when it came out. But I do believe you can purchase the PDF of it, regardless. Yeah, I read this from cover to cover early on, and ever since I've been treating it kind of like the Solo Gamemaster's Bible, as opposed to like what people normally treat it as. The 10 mindsets of a solo GM appendix is kind of like my go-to, more for reassurance. Everyone has a favorite passage in a text that they like and they always refer to in any tome, in books, Game Master's guides, in religious texts or whatever, everyone has some quote or something that they go, I like this. And for me, it is everything is playing, and what happens next is the only essential question for any story, is what happens next. And with those two mindsets, for me, I can get a lot accomplished in a session. And even if it's only, in the terms of the game itself, a minor a minor storyline, or like a plot point. In my most recent Iron Sworn Starforged and Vaults of Varn episode, had no idea that the monument, the anomaly, would create a situation where my character Ardell was gonna struggle in getting information from this madman, and the off-putting nature of the information was interesting. And that hour-long video only in game, covered one hex and a few rolls, and that's okay too. I used to struggle with, I'm not getting enough accomplished with my character. I'm not getting enough done with my character. But as long as you just answer and have fun and enjoy the question of what happens next, then none of that baggage matters. Just sink your teeth into the hobby, enjoy what you're currently doing, and just don't worry about the other stuff for the moment. And it's kind of what's really great about this hobby, is we can sink our teeth into anything that we want and create a story from it. And I love that. I love that so much. The mindset number 6, play emotion and not mechanics, is also pretty cool, because that reinforces and leans on the idea that story and the narration matters way more than looking at the character sheet to see what your character might be able to do. As a procedural player, I struggle with that sometimes, and I look, okay, well, does my character have an ability to help him or anything like that? But again, solo games, it's your game and no one else's. And regardless of if we put it up on there for people to watch, or if we sit at the table all in our mind with no one else around with some background music, and literally no other audience but ourselves, it does not matter. You are sitting down at that table for yourself because you want to create a story and you want to play a game. And even if that story is rolling a dungeon, moving into that room, killing some orcs, moving on, finding a treasure, it's a mimic, killing that mimic, getting that big old sword for the barbarian that dies in the next room, that's still a story. Even if it's just a procedural, what happens next in the next room, it's still a story. And that's, again, I absolutely love that aspect of the hobby. Everyone enjoys it in many different ways. And what's great also is that point 4 of this book, words not dice, will help you transition into the next part of the story. And I like that, because even if you roll to see what's in the room, you don't immediately plop your character into that room. You can, mechanically, of course. But there's an element of, if you move into the next room, there's a transition, and words and the things that you say about that situation is kind of like the heart of what turns a procedural game into a story. If you plop your party in front of a dungeon with no context, with no reason why they're there, that's the transition already. Even tabletop group games, 5e, Call of Cthulhu, I mean, any tabletop role-playing game that is based on group play, where they go to a singular location together, especially adventure modules, there's always a hook, a reason why the whole party is there. And that's a transition already from whatever they were previously doing into why they're here. That's just on a bigger scale. If you scale it down into like a single situation, like going from one room to another, you still got to transition from that room to the next. And you use words to do that. And you use descriptors. You use the long hall, and you use things like that. That's why there are hallways in dungeons, not because they're there to connect the rooms to the next. If we didn't have halls, then everything would just be a point crawl, and it literally would be just mechanics. And there are games out there that have done that. I've played them. I don't mind them. I enjoy them for the abstractness of what a dungeon can be. The Dark Below by Anna Landon is exactly that. It's a point crawl, but it's a theater of the mind point crawl, because there's no mechanics for creating the dungeon or the space. It's up to the player and the GM to figure that out. But hallways are transitions, and you can use those times in any game to create not just a mechanical bridge from one room to the next, but a narrative bridge from one part of the story to the next. And Geek Gamers explained that really well in the book as well. And of course, lots of her videos talk about that kind of thing. And, of course, there's the element of, she talks about adding, the game into the role-playing. And you can get caught up in just rolling a scenario, and then, well, you come up with an idea and you roll with it. And you speak on, that transition period, but you talk a lot about the dripping water, and then your character stops and wonders why there's water underneath, and then you just keep telling a story that drags a bit, but has no mechanics, has no, game in it. It's just talking. And you can always enjoy that, but that allows your brain and you as the player to sort of derail yourself from the game itself, because you're trying to create a story, but in a game. You got to remember that there are rules, there is a rubric involved. And even if you don't use a rubric, there is some sort of structure to help us guide the character and the story to some sort of, pausing point or a finality, depending on how long you want to make it. I just wanted to test this format a bit. I might actually redo this, but until next time, folks, peace, and I'll see you on the flip side.